We're back with DPE Peyton and Low to talk about acronyms and stabilized approach and checklist. But our next episode with Peyton, we want questions from you. So any questions you got, leave them down in the comments below. He's got a whole list of acronyms, odd end acronyms, fundamentals of instructing acronyms.
Right, I didn't make this list up.
Yeah.
An applicant that I was testing for initial flight instructor gave me this.
Okay.
We want the list you made up.
I haven't made one up.
You haven't made any acronyms
No,
up?
but I mean, there's during the fundamentals of instruction part of the test, you ask a lot of questions on, it's basically psychology 101. If you ever took that in college, it's a lot of the same information. But there are things that you have to memorize, and these acronyms, help. Probably the most commonly used one in the FOI is RUAC, RUAC, which is the 4 levels of learning. Road understanding, application, correlation. So that's an example of what we're doing here. RUAC is one of many that are in here. There are a lot of them in here I'd never seen before, and actually some of them are fairly humorous.
Yeah,
with the way they came up with the words.
What are some of the funny ones?
You should quiz Ryan on them, see if he can get
Yeah, no, we shouldn't do that. We shouldn't do that.
He always feels like he's being quizzed.
I feel like I'll fail the Checkride.
There's a Roscoe P.
Roscoe P.
Roscoe P. ROSCOP. Roscoe P. That's characteristics of an effective question. And the characteristics of an effective question are require definite answers. That's the R. One specific purpose. Stimulate thought. Clear in meaning. One idea and previously covered information relates to question. That's where Roscoe P comes from.
Okay.
I don't think.
I don't know how that. Yeah, that's it's a lot. It's a stretch to get that.
What's the P?
Roscoe P. Previously covered information relates to question.
Oh, that's a long sentence for P.
Yeah.
Well, it is. I mean, some of these I probably wouldn't use myself. I mean,
yeah, that's kind of a hard one to remember.
It is a hard one to remember. Liquor. L-I-Q-U-R.
That one may not be hard.
Yeah. Liquor. We're talking about developing communication skills. And, what are some of the good communication skills you need to have as a flight instructor? Well, liquor, listening, instructional communication, questioning, instructional enhancement, and role playing. Again, I don't know where they came up with these, how they ever figured all this out. Instructor's Toolbox for Listening. And the acronym is DDT COBCLAD.
Oh, Lord.
Don't interrupt, don't judge, think before answering, close enough to hear, observe nonverbal behavior, be aware of basics, concentrate, look for underlying feelings, avoid rehearsing answers while listening, and do not insist on the last word.
So that's a stretch too.
I already
Personally,
forgot it.
I normally don't get this deep into the FOI questions. I mean, what I'm really looking for is the applicant's ability to teach. These are things that they need to be familiar with, but as far as me personally asking specific questions like what should instructors have in their toolbox for listening, that's just not a valid question. Yeah. We've got Fast Cocoa.
Ooh.
Fast Cocoa. What is that one for?
Well, these are the characteristics of a critique.
Okay.
Fast Cocoa. Flexible, acceptable, specific, thoughtful, comprehensive, objective, constructive, and organized.
Sounds like a lot of words.
Kind of reminds me of the Boy Scout motto. We got to be kind, loyal, obedient, thrifty, reverent.
Yeah.
You weren't a Boy Scout.
Well, I don't remember it all.
Well, there might be some acronyms. There might be some acronyms for passing the Boy Scout initial merit badge. PAL.
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 Okay. PAL. Like PAL, like PAL?
Evaluation, PAL, performance tests, oral quizzes, and written tests. How do you evaluate people?
Okay.
PAL.
PAL.
Characteristics of effective questions. Packaboo.
Yes.
Packaboo.
I like
P-A-C-A-B-O-O. Packaboo. Proper English, apply to the subject of instruction, challenges the student, adapted to the ability and level of learning and of the student. Brief and concise, but clear and definite. Only one correct answer and one idea. Packaboo. Characteristics of a good test. This is Curvdo. Curvdo. C-U-R-V-D-O. Comprehensiveness, usability, reliability, validity, discrimination, and objectivity.
All of these sound very similar to each other.
Yeah, they do.
Well, they do. It's Psychology 101. Types of questions to avoid. The acronym is POTBIT.
I bet.
Puzzle, oversized, toss-up, bewilderment, irrelevant, and trick.
Yeah.
Bewilderment.
Bewilderment. You're not supposed to ask bewildering questions.
And don't try to trick them.
I mean, that's kind of what the FAA does on the written test.
Tries to trick you?
Oh, yeah. They'll throw in a different word, which will change the answer you select.
I mean, there's pages of this stuff. I mean, if anybody really wants this, I'll be more than happy to let you make a copy.
Okay.
And you can sell them if you want to, hand them out. I don't care.
It'll go towards getting new mic stands.
New equipment. New equipment.
A model for decision making. This one actually makes pretty good sense. DECIDE is the
makes
acronym.
sense.
DECIDE. And that stands for detect a change needing attention, estimate the need to react to or counter the change, choose the most desirable outcome, identify actions to successfully control the change, do something to adapt to and overcome the change, evaluate the effect of the action and use to counter the change.
It's decision making, huh?
Yeah.
Yeah, I've heard of that one before. That one's in one of our textbooks, the Jepson textbook.
Spam gap.
I've never heard of spam
Spam gap.
Spam gap. This is the purpose of a lesson plan.
Okay.
So, the question might be, what is the purpose of a lesson plan? And he goes, spam gap. And I said, well, all right, what does that stand for?
What does that mean?
What if someone just gave you the acronym?
Good answer. Next question.
How to pass.
Serves as a means of relating the lesson to the objectives of the course of training. That's the S. I mean, I don't know if you want to go through all this or not, but I mean, there's just, but like I said, there's 6 or 7 pages of that stuff here.
Yeah.
So,
I can put a like make it like 99 cents.
99 cents. We'll sell it on the
see how many
on the
people,
website.
yeah.
See if we can.
all right.
We'll give you 50% for bringing it in.
I'll take it. That sounds good. Yeah. Might be able to work on some more here that create some of our own.
Yeah. Add to the list.
Like FUBAR, snafu. Those aren't on here, but they're.
What's FUBAR?
You shouldn't have asked.
I love the ones Peyton says because he.
Well, these are like from the Army. FUBAR is the F word up. The F word up beyond all recognition. FUBAR. Well, it's a military thing. I mean, the snafu is situation normal, all effed up.
Okay.
Oh, okay.
Snafu.
All the ones Peyton knows has the F word in it.
I know other ones too, but we're not going to get into those here.
There's another one I've heard that was it piss poor planning or proper planning prevents piss poor performance.
That's it.
Yeah.
P.
Yeah.
That's a good one.
Yeah.
Yeah,
that's a good one for flying. I mean,
We're gonna put that on the wall.
Yeah, we should.
Well, let's talk about stable approaches.
Yeah, you said the FAA is really emphasizing that.
It's a huge emphasis area. When you start flying professionally, whether it's with an airline or with any major company that has a safety management system program, which is required by the FAA, they're required to have this FOQA program. It's called FOQA, Flight Operations Quality Assurance.
Another
FOQA.
acronym.
Another acronym. Yeah, another acronym.
But you're going to be living with FOQA when you go to work as a professional pilot. And what it is all of the airplanes now that we're flying, modern airplanes, have a flight data recorder in them. And that flight data recorder is recording everything that the airplane does, every control input, every power change, speed, altitude, rate of descent. It sees it all, and it's all being digitally recorded. The airplanes are all connected to the internet now. And depending on how the particular company has it set up, it's either transmitting a lot of this information on a regular basis over the internet. I mean, where I worked, every 15 minutes there was a data burst that went to the company. If not, they download it at the end of the day. They plug into the flight data recorder, download the information, and transmit it to the company. So all the information from each airplane's flying that day goes into this mainframe computer, and the database is looking for unstable approaches.
Is it alert?
Or anything that's out of the ordinary. But it's really looking for unstable approaches.
The company gets an alert as soon as something bad is out of the parameters?
Yes. If it sees an unstable approach, it flags it, and then you get a phone call. If you're the PIC in the airplane, you're going to get a phone call. Typically, the phone call comes from a union committee. The company knows there's been an unstable approach, but they don't have the names of the crew at this point, but the union does.
Yeah.
So the union, assuming it's a unionized company, you get a call from what's called a union gatekeeper. He calls you up and says, hey, we see an unstable approach, such and such a place, such and such a time. You want to explain to us what happened. So now you get your chance to talk about why it was unstable.
Yeah.
You know, it might be something as simple as ATC left us high. We were having a hard time getting down. We had our speed brakes out. We crossed the final approach fix 500 feet too high and 30 knots too fast. And as a result, we landed long. But we made it. Why are you calling me?
Yeah.
And if that's your answer, your next event for you is probably going to be an in-person trip to the chief pilot's office. You know, if you say, well, I should have gone around, next time I won't let it happen again, that probably will be the end of it. If that's your first phone call, put it that way.
Do they have a time where some of those things fall off and then or is it throughout your career at this company?
Well, in my experience, I'm not saying I've ever gotten that phone call, but I'm just saying that I know people who have, and it's usually within 2 or 3 days from the time it happens. It might even be the next day or the same day.
Okay.
It just depends.
Yeah.
But there's not a lot of time that passes before you get the call. The reason that there's so much emphasis on the stable approaches is because a lot of the accidents that are happening in high-performance airplanes are runway excursions. They're going off the end of the runway because they land fast and long, either or.
I've been seeing that a lot in the news. You see,
well, it's probably the most common high performance or jet airplane, shall we say, event is they run off the end of the runway.
How's the FAA define a stabilized approach?
Well, let's talk about what's not a stable approach.
Okay.
Just as an interesting point, because I've gotten some unusual answers when I ask people what stable approaches are. Even private pilots need to know what a stable approach is and what constitutes a stable approach, but what to do if your approach is unstable. So just backing up from that, I guess my reason in pointing that out is because on a private pilot oral test, they're going to get questioned on stable approaches. I mean, it's a big emphasis area. And I've had some unusual answers like I think this person was joking, but I'm not sure they were. They said, I asked him what a stable approach is. He says, well, when I'm going out to ride my favorite pony and I'm approaching the stall where he's kept, I want to be careful not to make any loud noises or sudden movements. And it helps if I have sugar cubes in my hand.
Okay. That I don't think I would answer that way.
And if I slip on some horse manure that didn't get cleaned up and fall in on my face, then that's a forward slip to a landing. Well, I mean, that's a little bit ridiculous, but I've seen some things some answers that are close to that.
Yeah. Okay.
They have no clue
they don't have
what
any
constitutes
understanding
a stable
of it.
approach.
Yeah. That's a crazy answer.
Well, so there's 5 things really that we need to think about on a stable approach. Runway alignment.
Center line
That's
alignment.
self-explanatory.
Yeah.
Aligned with the runway. Mm-hmm. Speed. How fast are you going to let yourself be? Or you as an instructor, how fast are you going to let your student be? How slow are you going to let him be relative to the recommended approach speed? So let's say we're in a 172. I mean, typically we're using about a 70 knot approach speed.
Yeah.
If we're doing a short field landing, it's a little less than that. But just say a normal approach and landing somewhere around 70. Have you thought about that? How slow are you going to let your guy or gal be, and how fast?
I mean, I'd look in the POH and go by those numbers, and they say 55 to 65 with full flaps. So I kind of stay in that range, you know.
The general rule of thumb is -5 plus 10. In other words, if approach speed is 70, just as a good round number, we don't want to be any slower than 65 or any faster than 80. That's the speed window. Mm-hmm. So we've got alignment, we've got the speed window, rate of descent.
500 feet is what I would use.
That's a good number. I mean, depends on what kind of airplane you're in.
Yeah.
I mean, if you're in an airplane, if you're in a high performance, a jet airplane with 120 mile an hour, 120 knot approach speed, you're going to have a higher rate of descent.
I'm thinking about
in a 172, 500 feet a minute is probably a good number.
Yeah.
Glide path. Well, we want to be on a 3-degree glide path. If we have VASI or PAPI, we have a way to judge that. But if we don't have any visual indication of our glide path, we need to have a way to estimate whether we're on a 3-degree glide path or not. Now, most people don't have an inclinometer built into their eyeballs, so they're estimating it. But there is a way you can do a little bit of mental math and figure out whether you're on a 3-degree glide path or not if you know the distance to the runway. One of the airports we use all the time is Abbeville, so typically we put it in the GPS when we go down there, and that distance to Abbeville is to the airport reference point, right? More or less the center of the airport. It's not to the end of the runway. It's not to the 1,000-foot marker. It's to the airport reference point. Yeah. But this is not an exact science. We're talking about estimating here, but it gives you a ballpark figure distance to the 1,000-foot marker, shall we say, because a 1,000-foot marker is probably in an airport like Abbeville is not a long way from the center of the airport. Yeah. So we have the distance to the center of the airport. So if I'm on a 3-mile final, it's 3 miles to the airport, and I'm on a 3-degree glide path, what's my altitude going to be? You thought about that?
It's about 900 feet.
About 900 feet. Yeah. The formula is 300 feet per nautical mile for a 3-degree glide path. So if you're 5 miles out, you're at 1,500 feet. 4 miles, 1,200. 3 miles, 900. 2 miles, 600.
Yeah.
1 mile, 300. It's a ballpark. It's a mental math, easy ballpark figure way of
figuring out if you're on a 3-degree glide slope. Yeah.
So obviously, if you're a mile from the end of the runway and you're 600 feet, well, not on a 3-degree glide path.
You're a little too high.
Airplane fully configured.
So flaps will gear down.
Obviously gear down, and flaps, well, what does that mean? Properly configured. Well, that means the flaps you're going to use for landing. You're not going to make any changes at the point you decide you're stable. So that brings up another parameter of, well, where am I going to make this decision? In other words, an altitude above the ground. We need to have an altitude at which we're not going to go below that altitude without meeting all of those parameters. In the world I lived in when I was flying professionally, that call out came at 500 feet on a visual approach. It came at 1,000 feet on an instrument approach. Now we're talking about a 2-pilot environment, but all the airlines have this and all the professional operators have this call out now. And it may be at slightly different altitudes, but I think that's the general guidance is 1,000 feet on an instrument approach, 500 feet on a visual approach. The non-flying pilot, his call out is 500 stable. And that means you meet all of those parameters we just talked about. If the call out is 500 unstable, you have to go around. It's not an option.
Okay.
You as the pilot flying can't say, no, we've got it. I'm fine. We're going to make it. Not an option. You have to go around with an unstable call out. If you don't, you're going to get fired.
Wow.
Well, it all goes on the cockpit voice recorder.
Yeah, so they
all
know.
Goes on the flight data recorder.
Yeah.
If you get an unstable call out and you don't go around, you're going to be in trouble.
Yeah.
We need to be focusing on this now from the very beginning with our private pilots so that they
primary training
because they're going to be living with this the rest of their flying career. And for good reason. It does make things safer. That's the bottom line. Is it makes a safer approach. So in the Checkride world, we're doing a short field landing, let's say, with no obstacle at the end of the runway. So there's no reason to make a steeper than normal approach. Should be a stable approach, normal glide path.
Yeah.
And it's obvious to me when they're at 300 feet that they're not going to make it because I've given them a piece of runway to land and stop on. It's reasonably long enough.
So they should go around.
It's obvious to me that they're not going to get stopped in the distance I've given them, and yet they land anyway, rather than go around. So it's not just about teaching what a stable approach is. It's about teaching the go-around decision.
Yeah.
The fact that I am unstable and I am going to go around. Obviously, in the beginning, when you're first teaching them how to take off and land, well, they're going to be unstable. They're in the learning process, and you're going to probably let them be unstable and let them land long and fast to show them why we don't want to do this. Look how much more runway it uses. So you let them learn from their own mistakes, but then once they're to the point where they're ready to take their private check ride, as an example, they should be able to recognize an unstable approach and go around. It's not just the technique, it's the go around decision that's not being taught properly.
I'm probably guilty of that too, just saying, oh, you can make it. We got 8,000 feet out here. So on the airport here, like in Abbeville, you may not be able, you got 5,000 feet more over there. A Generette, I guess, is probably the worst because it's a 3,000 foot runway. So,
well, exactly. And when you look at the ACS for the short field landing for both private and commercial, it doesn't require an obstacle. An obstacle is an option.
yeah.
The DPE gets to choose whether there's an obstacle at the end of the runway or not. So you need to make sure you're training it both ways,
Yeah.
with and without an obstacle. So obviously with no obstacle, there's no reason to make a steeper than normal approach like you might do if you had an obstacle. I typically don't give an obstacle because if you give them an obstacle, it pretty much takes away the requirement to touch down on the numbers because you're not going
to stay high.
You
then
have to
just
stay high.
Yeah, drop down.
And no, everybody's eyeballs are calibrated a little bit differently. If I give you a 50-foot obstacle, what looks like 50 feet to you might look like 100 feet to me.
Yeah.
And the altimeter is not accurate enough to really determine the obstacle height. So it's not a real accurate way of determining how high the obstacle is. I say I give you a 50-foot obstacle. Is it really 50 feet
Yeah.
without one being there?
I don't know.
Maybe.
Yeah.
I found it's much more effective to give a simulated short runway. Let's just say we've done our takeoff and landing calculations before we even go fly the airplane to determine how much runway it's going to take. And we see it's going to take, 800 feet to land and stop, which is a typical number in a 172. Actually, that's a little bit long for a 172 at sea level. That's 800 feet's not very much runway.
No, it's not.
But the book says you can do it.
Yeah. I'd be scared to do it at 800 feet.
Well, I'm not going to give somebody 800 feet.
Yeah.
Especially not a private pilot. I mean, typically in a 172 here at sea level on a hot day in the summer, they should easily be able to land and get it stopped by the top of the 1,000-foot markers.
Yeah.
That's 1,200 feet. That's plenty. That's more than twice as much as you really need, according to the book.
Yeah, I was thinking, I don't think we have any place 3,000 is the shortest. And actually, Generette has, 2,400 or whatever, and one depending on what runway you land on.
Well, keep in mind, too, that when we're teaching short field landings, it's probably not going to be it's probably going to be a grass runway.
Oh, yeah.
It's probably not going to be a real airport somewhere.
Yeah.
You're landing in your buddy's farm or a grass strip somewhere. Maybe you've got a piece of property you're going to land on. You can't assume that your student's always going to be landing in Lafayette or Abbeville or Opelousas. I mean, once they get their rating,
they could go anywhere.
Well,
can you land anywhere?
You can't land anywhere.
Well, but like if you do have property and you have enough space to land, you can land?
Yes.
That's kind of cool.
So when we're talking at the private pilot level, a short field landing is probably going to be on grass somewhere. And most private pilots that I test have never landed on grass because the flight school's insurance doesn't cover grass landings.
Yeah. Well, sometimes we'd take people to Red Oak because Shannon doesn't.
Well, I think it's a
mind.
good idea to do it because it is a little different. The acceleration is slower. There's more drag, from the wheels rolling on the grass, and the braking's not as good because tires tend to slide on grass.
It's a visual, a different visual too when you're coming in because you got everything so much closer, buildings and trees. And
there's no numbers.
Stuff.
There's no line down the center. There's a lot of differences. So I think it's a good thing to take them to a grass runway if you can.
Yeah.
What's the shortest short field landing?
They have a competition in Jennings every year where they do
short field landings?
Yes.
Really?
Takeoffs and landings.
I mean, there's people landing in 10 feet.
Cool.
Yeah. They come down and pretty much just stop.
That's crazy.
These are airplanes with hopped up motors and, big wings and lots of flaps and ailerons that droop down as flaps, and they're designed specifically for that.
Gotcha.
And the wind has a big effect on it too.
Yeah. Have you gone to that?
I've not. I've seen it. I've not taken part in it.
Yeah. I've never been either.
Back to the stable approach. We were talking about an altitude at which we decide whether we're stable or unstable. And I think probably in the flight training world, 300 feet is probably a good number.
Yeah.
We probably don't want them going below 300 feet without hitting all those 5 targets we talked about. But huge emphasis area, probably not being focused on enough in primary training.
If you get a call from the union, you have one incident where you were unstabilized. What if you have a second incident where you're unstabilized? I guess it's up to the company to decide whether they fire you or not.
Is it a 3 strikes you're out?
Yeah, or is it 3 strikes you're out? Or
I guess it depends on the company you're working for. I mean, if you had 2 unstable approaches back to back and there was a valid reason, that would be one thing, but it was just poor pilot technique.
Yeah.
That's another one.
So generally they want you to straighten up after you do.
If you make an unstable approach and you go around rather than land, you're probably not going to get a phone call.
Okay.
Because you made the right decision. It's the guys who are unstable and land anyway, they're going to get the call. If there's something that's drastically unstable and maybe they save it right at the end, they get it stabilized before they get to 500 feet, they might still get a call, but chances are much less likely you're going to get a call if you go around as you should. When people are reluctant to go around.
You think you could save it and then.
Well, pilots don't like to go around, right?
Yeah.
It takes more time, burns more gas. If you're flying for the airline, you got to write a report. Why'd you go around? It's a short little thing, but I mean, you do have to explain it because it throws everything into. When you go around at a big airport, it might be 15 minutes before you get back on the ground.
Yeah.
Go-arounds are free. You should never hesitate to go around if you're not sure.
So on the Checkride, the 2, you could go around on any landing except for the slip to landing. Talking about the private pilot Checkride.
Well, I mean,
on the ACS, that I don't think it says.
Some approaches we do are intentionally unstable. A power off 180 is an intentionally unstable approach. A forward slip to a landing because of the high rate of descent and the steep angle is unstable. A simulated engine failure is unstable, but we're doing that on purpose.
Yeah.
So a purpose, those maneuvers are unstable by their nature. But when we're doing a normal approach, a short field, a soft field, those should all be stable all the time.
Yeah.
I mean, we're in a single pilot environment, even though there's an instructor and a student on board. I mean, the training is single pilot type training. We're training them to do this by themselves. So we're not going to have somebody over there saying 500 unstable. There's nobody telling them to go around.
You're looking at decision making.
We want them to make that decision on their own without having to be told to.
So if it is unstable and they don't go around, it's potentially a Checkride failure.
That's correct.
Yeah.
Potentially, or is it automatic?
Well, it depends.
Okay.
It's not necessarily automatic.
It's like if everything else was perfect and they know they made an unstable approach, you'd be like, okay, just watch it next time. You don't want to say that. You don't want to tell people.
Well, I mean, most Checkrides are you consistently messing up on things. I mean, if you have a failure, it's usually just a complete weak area of obviously this person doesn't know this, or your flying is just everything you're doing is just not.
Gotcha.
Well, I guess you could put it this way. I mean, the stable approach I expect to see from a commercial pilot or an ATP is going to be more stable than the one I see from a private pilot, and that he's closer to hitting all those targets. He's not quite as far off maybe as a private pilot's going to be. I mean,
you got higher expectations.
Yeah, the standards are higher,
hours.
even though it's the same basic concept.
Right.
The guy who goes around when he's unstable actually gets a gold star.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a good call. It's the right thing to do. Whereas if they go ahead and land anyway, it could be an unsatisfactory approach.
Gotcha.
Typically, an unstable approach results in a long landing.
Okay.
What's a long landing? Well, anything that's not in the first third of the runway is definitely a long landing.
Typically, it doesn't matter the runway size?
You should always touch down in the first third of the runway, unless you're intentionally not touching down in the first third. I mean, if I'm landing on a 12,000-foot runway and the turnoff I want to make is 10,000 feet down the runway, I might intentionally land long so that I don't have to taxi as far. But other than a reason like that, we want every approach to be a stable approach.
I like your scenario questions.
That's a big part of flight instructing is the scenario-based training. When I was training, I didn't remember that being as much of a thing as it has recently.
No, scenario-based training and testing has really come into its own probably in the last 10 years. Yeah. And it works. Scenarios are the best way to determine whether your student is at the correlation level of learning. You give them a scenario to deal with.
Yeah, it makes them think different.
An example that that I might use as a flight instructor. Let's say we're on a dual cross country. So the student's already soloed. He knows how to fly the airplane. We've done a little bit of cross country flying around, maybe going to Opelousas and stuff like that, but we haven't gone on a long cross country. So he's had the basic training. Now we're headed to Lake Charles, and I see off to the right Jennings up there, and I look over at the student and say, the engine just started running rough, simulated.
Yeah.
So I've given him a scenario. If he's at the correlation level of learning, his first question is probably going to be, how rough is it?
Yeah.
Because that makes a big difference. Is it so rough I'm going to have to land in a cow pasture? Or is it a little bit rough where I can maintain altitude at a reduced airspeed? So in that scenario, I might say, it's a little rough. It feels like a mag failure to me. If he's at the correlation level of learning, he'll do a mag check. All right, so now we have a simulated mag failure. And I'll ask him, what are you going to do? Well, I guess there's 4 choices. One is to land in a cow pasture. It's probably not the best choice.
No, I wouldn't do that one.
Not Peyton's favorite choice.
Next choice is to turn around and go back to where you started from.
And I probably wouldn't do that one either.
Depends on where you are.
Yeah.
Third choice is continue to your destination. And fourth choice is let's divert to that airport that's 5 miles away that I know has a maintenance facility.
Yeah.
Which would you Ryan?
I would pick that last one.
That's probably the best choice.
There you go.
I probably would pick that last one.
So now at that point, I'm going to say, okay, well, let's do it. I'm going to let the scenario play out.
Uh-oh.
Now, several choices to be made. First of all, what's the route going to be? Is he going to go in a straight line that takes me over a big lake or a bunch of trees where there's no place to go if the engine quits? Or is he going to circumnavigate that? How's he going to manage his altitude? If it's me, I'm going to stay at 45. Let's say I'm at 4,500 feet. I'm going to stay at altitude until I get in gliding distance of the runway.
Yeah.
What runway are we going to land on? How are we going to enter the traffic pattern? Those are all decisions that I'm going to let him go ahead and make those. Since the engine's not really running rough, and it's not unsafe if he descends early or flies over the trees or the water necessarily, I'm going to let him go ahead and do it. And when we get on the ground, now we'll debrief and say, okay, well, we made it. That's good. Let's talk about a better way to do what you just did. How come you gave away all your altitude? The answer you usually get is, well, I can't believe I did that.
I don't know.
That's obvious. Why did I? I don't know why I did that. Now they're a little bit embarrassed by the fact that they did it, and they've learned from their own mistake, and they'll probably remember that.
Yeah.
Well, we're not born with this knowledge.
Yeah.
Somebody's got to teach it to you. Some of it's logical and just common sense, but there are other things where they may seem obvious to you, but I've just never thought about it before, and I'll learn. And if you let them learn from their own mistakes, it'd be nice if it didn't work. It'd be nice if we didn't learn best from our own mistakes, wouldn't it? That's a human nature thing.
Yeah, that's what I try to let them mess up a little bit, and then usually when you're coming back with the new student from Opelousas, and they end up staying high, coming into Lafayette, where I would have started descending, but then that doesn't dawn on them until they're too close to the airport. Oh, I should have started descending. I just let them go ahead and stay high, because they don't learn if I sit there and tell them, oh, you need to start descent now. Now, I mean, it's not the very first flight. Usually I've flown with them. Maybe they soloed already and we just already gone to Opelousas a bunch of times. But sometimes when they're after solo, I just let them, stay high, and then they realize it. And then that's usually after that they learn.
Well, I think there is some value in letting them learn from their own mistakes. Now, I'm not going to let somebody touch down in a 20-degree crab in a crosswind and learn from that.
Yeah, no. You got to worry about yourself too.
Exactly, but in a scenario where you can do it without it being unsafe, I think there's some value in it.
Yeah,
it's like the whole "don't let your baby stick a fork in an outlet," and then they're like, "Why? And then they do it, and they're like, "That's why."
Yes. Another emphasis, I guess, the FA's on is checklist too. Make sure you follow your checklist.
A great deal of emphasis on checklist, and there's more than one way to do a checklist.
Yeah.
The read and do method is probably the most common, where in single pilot environment, you read it and do it. When you're operating with 2 pilots, it's typically challenge and response. One guy is reading the checklist, the other guy is doing it and responding. And of course, there's always the the flow method too, where you have it memorized and you do a flow.
But you still go back to your checklist to make sure
Yes, you should go back to your checklist to make sure you didn't miss anything. In the flight training environment, I mean, obviously you can't pick up a checklist when you're doing a touch and go and look at it.
Yeah.
You do that with a flow. But there is plenty of time in the traffic pattern, as simple as the checklists are in a 172, to actually either pull up the checklist and look at it or do it from memory and then take a quick look at the checklist. I mean, checklist doesn't have to be a notebook-sized document.
Yeah.
It can be a placard. It can be a lot of 172s have it on the visor where you can just flip it down. It's only 4 or 5 items typically, but what the FAA would like to see is that before every takeoff, before every landing, when you're in the traffic pattern, you know, if you're on downwind, when you do it, you should say before landing checklist, do it.
Yeah.
And it's not a bad idea to say before landing checklist complete. That's what you're going to be living with when you get into the airline world.
The bigger stuff, yeah.
You don't do anything without a checklist. Yeah. Everything is by the checklist. So you might as well get used to it now.
One of our, the video we did today was talking about gumps, you know, doing a gumps check and gas under, that's another acronym.
It is.
Gas undercarriage, mixture prop, kind of a flow.
Seatbelt.
From an examiner's point of view, if I don't see the applicant pick up the checklist, or if he doesn't have it on their clipboard, or have it displayed somewhere in the cockpit, if they're not verbalizing what they're doing as they do it, I don't know whether they're doing it or not. I can't read their mind.
Yeah. So they need to either look at it or say what they're doing. I've heard people say, you know, do the gumps check, but in a Cessna with fixed gear, they'll say gears down and welded.
Gears down and welded.
Instead of the 3 green, you know?
Because you can't really change that.
Yeah, gears down anyway.
You can't use the checklist too much. You can only use it not enough, I guess is one way to put it.
Pull your checklist out.
Is there an acronym for the stable approach?
No, I don't know of one.
No.
Does Peyton get to make up one?
I'll start giving that some thought.
Yeah.
We'll keep everybody updated.
Yeah.
Yeah. Another common weak area I see when we're talking about takeoff and landing distance is how the airplane performs at higher elevation airports. You know, I always have my applicants do a takeoff and landing distance calculation at sea level and compare it to what it would be at 8,000 feet. And a 172, typically that's the top of the chart in terms of altitude. And we look at the numbers and talk about why the takeoff and landing roll are longer at the high elevation airport. And most people can tell me that it's because we have less dense air, but they don't understand any further than that. They don't understand how less dense air results in a longer landing roll, as an example. The typical answer I get when I say, well, why does it take 200 feet more runway to land and stop at the high elevation airport than it does at sea level? The answer I get fairly regularly is, well, the air is less dense, therefore we have less drag, and the airplane doesn't slow down as quickly, which is incorrect.
Yeah.
That's wrong.
Yes, wrong.
Well, it's logical when at first glance, it would make sense that less dense air would mean less drag, but they're not taking into account. It's like on the takeoff. When I ask them why the takeoff rolls longer, other than the fact that the engine doesn't create as much power and the prop doesn't create as much thrust, they say, well, the wings are creating less lift. That's why it takes more runway to get off the ground, which is not true either.
No.
At first glance, it would seem to be true, but when I hear that answer, it tells me that they don't understand the difference between indicated and true airspeed and how true airspeed affects the performance of the airplane. It's a common weak area.
I used to go up to Driggs, Idaho in the Piaggio, and when I'd land, I don't know, the field elevation I think was 5,000 or 6,000 feet, but it always felt, when I'd come in and land, I'd be on my indicated speed. But then as I'm get closer to the ground, everything's coming a lot faster because my true airspeed's faster.
Exactly.
So, and it's kind of a freaky feeling, especially in a plane like that where you're coming in at, 130 knots or whatever, 120 knots. The ground and trees and everything's moving so much faster. Well, so in a Cessna, you may not see unless you're at a smaller airport. But if you go to...
Well, the concept of there being less lift or less drag just because the air is thinner is invalid. We need to make sure they understand the fact that whether you're at sea level or 50,000 feet, if you're indicating 100 knots, you have the same amount of lift and the same amount of drag that you would at the other altitude. In other words, the same amount of lift and drag at sea level as you have at 50,000 feet if you're going 100 knots, because in order to get 100 knots indicated, you're probably going closer to 200 knots at that altitude. You know, at high altitudes where jet airplanes fly, as you know, the true airspeed can easily be more than twice the indicated airspeed when you're up high. So that's not something that private pilots, when they're learning to fly, see, but they need to be aware of how it works, the difference between indicated and true.
They could go anywhere. I mean, once they get their license, they can go over to Denver, and it'll be a whole different situation.
And they'd be really confused if they didn't know.
Yes, they will. Yeah.
Well, what we're trying to avoid is the guy who doesn't understand the difference. And he's making his approach at this high elevation airport. And as you said, he sees his rate of closure is much faster than he's used to seeing, even at the same approach speed. And he slows the airplane down because of the high, what he feels like is a high approach speed. And he stalls because the stall speed doesn't change either with altitude. Stall speeds don't change.
Yeah.
I did have an interest. This was just a funny little thing that happened. We were coming back into Lafayette after doing a check ride. It wasn't here. And we were coming back into Lafayette, and he called ATC, and ATC gave him a transponder code and said, ident. And the guy looked over at me and said, what did he say? I said, I don't know, I'm just a passenger. I don't understand any of that lingo. And he said, well, okay. I called him back and he said, squawk 1, 2, 3, 4 and ident. And the guy said, ident? What's that?
Oh, no.
Well, I just use that as an example. Yeah. You can't assume that your student knows what the word ident means unless you've actually done it and had them punch the button. So here's an applicant who'd been operating primarily in a non-radar environment, and he knew how to make the call, but he'd never been asked to ident before.
Yeah, that's such a common thing. It wouldn't cross my mind to teach him that either.
So what'd the student do?
Well, I reached down and pushed the button and said, see that thing that says ident right there? It wants you to push that button.
Gotcha.
I mean, I'm not going to, I wouldn't fail somebody for that. But I mean, I'm just saying it's one of those things where just got overlooked in his training.
Yeah.
Could the student have just asked the controller, hey, what's ident? Is that?
Yeah, he could have.
I feel like controllers usually say, I'd rather you ask than.
Yeah.
I also had an applicant that was having a lot of trouble with the radio, and the controller actually came on and said, are you a student pilot? Which what I think probably took him down a couple of notches at that moment. It's like, yes.
While on his check ride.
Yes, are you a student pilot?
That's hard. Like, oh, no, I failed this one.
Just one more funny thing that happened since you asked. This was on an instrument check ride, and we were headed out to a holding pattern, and it was about 15 miles away, and the applicant's over there drawing pictures on his knee board, trying to figure out how to get into the holding pattern. And he said, do you mind if I make a phone call?
Oh.
I said, you having a problem? He said, yeah. I'm not sure how to get into this holding pattern, and I'd like to call my instructor.
Yes.
Well, that kind of tickled me because that was a first. Nobody's ever asked to do that before. And so on one hand, I'm thinking, well, that's cheating and you can't do that. On the other hand, I'm thinking, well, that's pretty good crew resource management. I mean, if I'm having a maintenance problem or I got something I'm not sure about or I got lost commo and I'm in phone range, then I'm going to use my phone. So I decided to let it play out. I was just interested to see how it went, interested to see how it played out. And so he called, but he got his voicemail. So,
oh, no.
Oh, no.
He ultimately did get into the holding pattern okay. So he ended up passing his check ride. But when we got back on the ground, the instructor was there and said, did you try calling? Said, yeah.
Yes.
So I'm not recommending that we teach people to call their instructor when they don't know how to get in the holding pattern, but I just thought that was a humorous event.
I don't know what I would say. Are you calling me to do the... What are you calling me for?
Shouldn't you be on a check ride?
Yes, that's right. Thanks for coming again.
My pleasure.
Hopefully we get a lot of comments asking questions. That'd be a fun episode.
Hopefully that would be cool.
I'd love to.
See.
I love when people disagree with you or like question what you say.
Yeah, sometimes we have those.
So here's the comment.
Yeah, there you go.
It says a Part 91 pilot can legally start an approach even if the reported visibility is less than what is prescribed on the approach plate. I think the DPE was conflating Part 121, 135 rules with Part 91 rules. The requirement is that upon reaching the MDA DA, you have to have the flight visibility, which is different than reported visibility, required by the approach being flown before descending further. There is nothing that legally prevents Part 91 instrument-rated pilot from shooting an approach to an airport that is reporting visibility less than required. Should you? Probably not, but you legally can.
Yeah, that's correct. That's
yeah.
I didn't say anything contrary to that. I don't think.
I don't think you did either.
I think in the video we did go into that later on. So it's almost like he didn't watch the full video.
A different question. But if we have a DA, MDA in your first example of ceiling requirements, wouldn't that be considered a minimum? If the ceiling is 300 feet and the DA is 338, you wouldn't see the runway at DA. So doesn't that make it a requirement to land?
No.
Cool.
Because when the visibility is low, there is no ceiling. You're in a cloud. It's fog.
Yeah.
Or it's haze or smoke or rain or something. But there is no. I mean, a lot of times when the visibility is low, there is no ceiling. And typically ceilings too are not flat like this floor. Sometimes they are. I mean, you're in it and all of a sudden, poof, you're out. But more often than not, it's ragged. You're in and out. You know, you see the ground, it goes away. You see it again. You know, as you descend. So it's. Ceilings are only required for planning. 602, 802, 2003, 1003. But in flight, it's all about visibility.
Yeah.
A lot of people don't understand that. You know, they think ceiling's required.
Yeah.
Under Part 91 flight, can't you shoot the ILS no matter the ceiling? Not like commercial pilots that have to have the ceilings on the chart before they can even fly it?
No, they don't have to have the ceiling. You just have to have the visibility.
If I see the red terminating sidebars, can I descend below 100 AGL TDZE?
Yeah.
Cool. I love these.
Yeah, that's in the regulations.
Yeah, it's right there. That's one of the that's right there, descending below the DA or MDA.
Yeah.
91-167 says alternate must have weather reporting for it to qualify as an alternate, right?
No, you can have an alternate with no weather reporting. You got to be able to descend from the MEA.
Yeah. That's in the regs too. Yeah.
Flight Tales, woo-woo.
If you've made it this far, you've listened to the entire episode. And for that, we would just like to say thank you, and we hope you enjoyed it. If you have any questions about today's episode or suggestions for future episodes, just leave a comment or message us, and we'll do our best to answer. If you'd like to check out some fun aviation videos, check out our YouTube channel at Owens Flight Training. Or if you'd like to get more information on becoming a safe, knowledgeable, and confident pilot, just head over to our website, owensflighttraining.com.